Welcome to this webinar from F&P and about loyalty. Excuse me. I am Fiona Atkinson, the content manager at F&P. It's lovely to be here with you this morning. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, and I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I've got a few housekeeping notes before we get going today. If you have questions during the webinar, can you please use the Q&A box to put your questions in there? We'll probably answer the majority of questions at the end of Richard's presentation, but if anything comes up during the session that makes sense to be answered straight away, we'll put those questions to Richard. I can do that for you. So please use the Q&A box. You will receive the slides and the webinar recording by email in the days following the webinar. Just watch out for those. Can I ask, we're seeing quite a few AI note takers coming into the session. Do you mind just turning those off, please, everyone? You will receive a webinar recording and slides. It's just a bit distracting for us to have the AI assistants coming into the webinar. So please turn those off. I just wanted to mention that we've had a couple of issues this morning during our tech check with some of the audio for the videos that we're playing during the session. We've solved it all, but it does involve a little bit of swapping between me and Richard, our presenter for today. So please just bear with us while we swap screen sharing and so on. Thank you for that. I'd now like to introduce our speaker for today. We are joined by Richard Spencer, who is Director of About Loyalty, and Richard is dialing in from the UK quite late in his evening, so thank you so much for that, Richard. Richard helps charities grow by putting supporter experience at the heart of their plans and priorities, and today he's going to talk to us about turning excellent supporter experiences into long-term fundraising success. So Richard, thanks so much for being here today, and I'll hand over to you now and join you again for the Q&A at the end. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Fiona, and thank you to everybody who's come here this morning. So fantastic to see so many of you here. Really, really pleased. What have we got in line? What have we got in store for you today? So this is a wrapped of a lot of our key case studies, some of our best speakers from recent months. What I've done was we've compiled it all together and constructed a really clear, I think it's really clear roadmap as for how to put supporter experiences at the heart of what you're doing to deliver successful and outstanding fundraising. So today, we're going to explore what truly drives sustainable fundraising, and that is better supporter experiences. I'm going to tell you, so the structure of today, I'll give you a little bit of, tiny bit about loyalty, an even smaller bit about me. And then we're going to have some case studies. And as I say, they are going to tell the story. And each of those case studies has a range of hints and tips and practical takeaways. So really, my aim is to give you those practical insights and practical tips so that you'll get some different perspectives on supporter experience, different perspectives on what supporter experience means in terms of great fundraising, and then some practical stuff that you can do, stuff you can take away and do straight away. If any of this interests you at all, then please do get in touch, drop me a line. Really happy to speak to anybody about anything that you see this morning. And as Fiona said, if you've got questions, pop them in the Q&A, and we'll get around to answering those now this morning. Or if we can't do that now, or if you've got questions for any of the speakers who are on video, then we'll arrange to get a response to you. And so if you just leave your details with us, that'd be absolutely fine. So yeah, thank you. What I'm going to do now is start with a short introduction. Here we go. A roadmap to successful fundraising from better supporter experiences. So you've already seen me. There I am. If you do want to get in touch with me, there's my email address. There's a route to find me on LinkedIn, and that Calendly thing is the same as the QR code, which I'm sure you're all familiar with those. If you want to book an appointment, then that's absolutely perfect. Right. So before we start, I'm going to ask you if you can. So I haven't. I've not done this before. Well, actually, no, I have done this before, but with real people in a real room. So this is a little bit different for me. Some of you will be avidly watching your screens. Some of you might be actually sneakily doing some emails on the side. What I'd like all of you to do, please, is just for a moment to close your eyes. Bear with me. Please go with me on this. So I'd like you to just close your eyes and think about a charity, a non-profit. Either it might be the one you work for, and it might be one you support, but one that you're passionate about, one that's absolutely at the core, that you really believe in what this organisation does. I want you to think about a non-profit that it might be the one you work at, or it might be one that you support, or actually you may not support it directly through financially. You may volunteer for it, or you may do some campaigning on its behalf. It may not be a non-profit. It may be a sports team. It might be a school or community centre where you volunteer. But think about those places those organisations that you put yourself into, that you contribute of yourself into, and have a think about what that means to you. Just for a few seconds, what does that mean to you? Why is that important? Why do you give of yourself to this organisation, this football team, this school? Stuff going on there for you that's really important. Think about the feelings that you have when it goes well. What really drives you? What makes it the thing that you care about? If you can hold on to that thought for a moment, that feeling, what those organizations mean to you and who they are. Because I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. So about loyalty, when we think about supporter experience, when we think about great fundraising, all of the things we do, we start with the heart. We start with trying to get to the heart of what is it about your supporters, your donors? Why is it that they've stepped forward? What's going on for them? What does it mean to them? What does it mean in terms of the support that they give? That's absolutely at the heart of what we do. It's about how your supporters feel, not how they behave. By behave, I mean like transaction stuff, things that people do. That stuff's really, really important. People giving money is desperately important, but it starts with how people feel. People feel, and then as a result of how they feel, people do something, and that's a well understood pattern of how things pan out. And if somebody feels great about something, they're more likely to do it again. And if they don't feel great about it, they're less likely to do it again. So all of our research, and we've done a lot of research, is all based on how somebody's feelings connect to then their behaviours and what they do. We've now got millions and millions of data points from hundreds of thousands of charity supporters and non-profit supporters from around the world, and we know what works. That's a picture of a cover of a report, but within there is within all of our work is a model, a methodology. We've worked out exactly what kind of experience is important in driving fundraising. You may have heard of commitment, satisfaction, and trust as those three drivers. Those three drivers are incredibly important. In fact, they are the three most important elements of a good supporter experience that leads to successful and sustainable fundraising. In the case studies later on this morning, you're going to hear mentioned something called the Chase Index. I'm only mentioning it now because some of the speakers do refer to the Chase Index, but this is a service that we offer that helps charities and nonprofits measure the supporter experience, measure the commitment, satisfaction, and trust and join the dots and work out how to turn those experiences into strong, sustainable fundraising, successful fundraising. So there's loads of detail in what I could present here, but I'm not going to. If you'd like to find out more about the research and the evidence and all of that stuff, get in touch, have a look at the report, whatever. This morning's not for that. Today is not for that now. But what we're going to show you is some of the case studies from some of the nonprofits and charities that we've worked with. And there's quite a lot of them. So we've worked with lots of different organisations in lots of different countries all around the world. And also lots of really good friends and companions and colleagues from different types of organisation. So this community is what brings all of that data together. We're really, really privileged that all of these organisations themselves help pool the data so that we've got a huge data asset which allows us to understand what of those aspects of experience are most important in driving fundraising and what can make successful fundraising. In essence, it's pretty straightforward, and actually you already do this in lots of areas of your work, but we do this around feelings. So we measure how your supporters feel, we diagnose where those feelings are going well and where those feelings are not going so well. We help nonprofits take action to improve what's going on, and we can prove that that leads to income. So there's a real kind of, I guess, a hard fundraising commercial aspect to why we measure feelings, because it does lead to income. But there's also one of the, there's a cancer research organisation we worked with recently, and the gentleman there said, he talks about the soft power of our work, because actually it's not just about measuring the feelings, driving the income. He talks about the soft power in terms of the internal change that it's achieved across the organisation. So we often say, once you measure something, you can change it, and it changes you, because it's not just about you want to change how your supporters are experiencing you. We want to really tap into those feelings that we thought about right at the start. Actually, we want to encourage our colleagues as well to be thinking about experience. We want to be encouraging our colleagues in different parts of the organisation, because the experience that your supporters get isn't just from the things that the fundraisers do. The experiences your supporters have is because of what the whole organisation does. And actually, there's a real value and a real power in being able to bring that up the agenda across the whole organisation, so that you're putting your supporters' feelings, the experiences they have, right at the heart of your plans. This is at the foundation of everything we do. So when you measure loyalty, you suddenly can see where to focus, what to fix, what to celebrate. And most organisations don't actually have this clarity, which is why, some of the results I'm going to share with you this morning are particularly powerful. And I think one of the questions that we're often asked, is where do we start? And I think what we're going to help you really get to the bottom of this morning is not only where to start, but actually setting out that roadmap, a starting point, and then a series of steps that you could follow. It doesn't have to be linear. You can jump around on those, but certainly those key things that are really going to make the biggest difference. So I'd like to introduce the first of these video clips that we're going to share today. And this is really, you may know, this is Ken Burnett. And actually for this particular piece of work, Ken wanted to be introduced as the co-founder of the Commission on the Donor Experience. So Ken and I worked very closely on that. It's about 10 years ago now we started. And he's also the author of a very well-known book called Relationship Fundraising. I'm sure many of you will have heard of him. He knows a lot about fundraising and a lot about the experiences and a lot about the relationships that we seek to build with our supporters. So in this talk, Ken is going to set, I like to think of it as the philosophical foundation. He's going to be setting out, well, what's the problem we're trying to fix? What is it that supporters, the donors want? And he reminds us that donors give because they want to see change. And they look at us as the gateway to change, as charities. So think back to when I asked you, if you did close your eyes and you did think about it, maybe you were thinking of things like, actually, I want to make a difference. I want to change the world. This is the stuff that sits at the heart of supporter experience. Ken also highlights that a lot of organisations struggle with really not treating their donors particularly well. And actually, one of the things that we do is really can help you close that gap between what your supporters expect and actually what the reality is for them. So I'm going to hand over to Fiona now, who's going to play the video from Ken. I'd like to thank Ken in advance and to also thank Fiona for queuing up this video from Ken. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. If everyone can just, there may be a bit of a lag between the visuals and the audio, so apologies for that. We have tried our best. And what Ken has to say is the most important thing here. So just listen to his message, even if the visuals don't load quite as fast as they need to. So, okay, here we go. I'm going to hit play and I'm going to mute my.
Fiona, he's not playing.
Did you say it's not playing, Richard?
Yeah, the audio is not playing. The video is playing, but the audio is not coming through.
Oh, Bronwyn, I think it's to do with the setting in the background. Can you just check that? Sorry, everyone. We've had quite a few problems with this video this morning. Bronwyn, if you can just send me a message when you have fixed that setting, that would be great. Sorry, everyone. Bear with us. It sure does happen on the day, Christian. Thank you. I'm just going to hit play again. Richard, just call out if you can hear it or not hear it.
But one thing I'm sure we all already know
all good.
is what our donors really want. And donors all want to see change. Nobody ever gives us money for things to stay the same. They want the world to be a better place in small ways and large ways. And we are the gateway to that for them. They see something wrong. They want some role, some agency for them in putting it right. And we help them to see that and to enjoy it and to relish it. They want personally to make a difference. That, I think, is the biggest thing for donors. They want to make a real difference. And of course, they want to enjoy the experience of doing it, to feel that as a result of their giving, they've done something that's nice, that's worthwhile, that's valuable, and even life-changing in some instances. In return for this, we know, because donors tell us, we know that they don't want much in return, but they like it if their generosity is acknowledged. They do want to be treated well, and they love it if they can get a sense of belonging, of achievement, of fulfillment, if giving gives them a sense of purpose, that they've done something worthwhile. And they're thrilled if we can show them that giving can be good for them too. And it can. This is one of the most amazing things that I have discovered in recent years. And there's such a lot of information about it. And there's a lot of work going on around the world, mainly in academic centers, looking at how being a donor, generosity, is good for well-being. It's good for mental and physical health. And really, it should be part of a fulfilled and rounded life. And we are, in our sector, we don't make nearly enough of this. And of course, donors want to trust us and they want to have confidence in us. And that means they don't want to be pressurized or hassled by us. What kind of a friend is always asking me for money? Mostly, they just want to see bad things change and good things take their place. And we are the catalysts of that change. We fundraisers, we're the gateway to that change for them. So what donors want and how we can deliver it is actually a universal truth, and it's an irresistible meme. It's one of the world's most positive and powerful stories. And it's a fantastic thing for us to be able to deliver to the world. Yet, too often, donors don't feel that they're well treated by fundraisers. And in 2015 in the UK, they told us massively in their tens of thousands that they don't automatically feel well treated and respected when they're contacted by fundraisers. Because to them, it can so easily seem we fundraisers are only interested in getting more and more money out of them in any way that we can. And I gave two. My purpose in this was to show that we fundraisers have got so much going for us. This now should be a golden age for fundraisers. Yet, as it's currently structured and conducted, we are underachieving because we lose so many new donors. First-time givers the majority of them don't stay. In some areas, as much as 80% of first-time givers don't stay. Even multiple donors, they tend not to stay long enough. And the cost of replacing donors is crippling our sector and limiting our achievements. But we know that retention of regular, committed monthly donors can be as high as 90%, but there's not enough of our organisations working at this. As a result of this, our sector is hemorrhaging support. And no commercial business could stand to lose its customers at the rate that we do. And we're losing good fundraisers at an alarming rate too. So I believe our sector is underachieving. And yet these appalling statistics that are to be found nowadays seem to be accepted across our sector as simply the way it is. But we know that isn't the case. It isn't inevitable. The real challenge for fundraising today isn't a lack of understanding what needs to be done. Tragically, it's a lack of leadership and investment. Now, I know that there are some great fundraising organizations and great fundraising leaders and great fundraising teams, but I think they're still in the minority, and for the most donors, they judge by our whole field.
Thank you to Ken, and thank you for bearing with our technical bits, but actually it was worth waiting for, wasn't it? So that was a piece from Ken, an impassioned piece from Ken. And I think what Ken talks about there is actually how vitally important the experience that our donors and supporters have, how important that is, how vitally important it is, and how it's not just important as a nice thing to have, it's commercially essential. It drives retention. It keeps people giving who have come on board. Ken draws comparisons to like businesses and commercial sector, and those kinds of attrition or non-retention rates just wouldn't be tolerated in lots of places. But we kind of accept it. And I absolutely echo Ken saying when actually there are some fantastic organisations out there and some fantastic people, but there is a gap between what our supporters and donors feel and need and want, where their expectations are, and unfortunately, what we're able to deliver. So my takeaways, I'm just going to give you a few takeaways from Ken's talk. And these essentially, I guess these are the first block on the roadmap of how you put support experiences at the heart of good fundraising. So here's some key takeaways. Donors want to make a difference and enjoy the experience. Supporters want to make a difference and enjoy the experience. And I might put in brackets there, it's not about, they don't think, oh, I want to give money. This is about what it means to them. This is the thing that really matters. They want acknowledgement, respect, belonging, and purpose. And you might have thought of some of those words at the beginning when I asked you to close your eyes. You might have thought about that's actually why I do the things I do. A great insight from Ken. Generosity improves well-being, and we underuse this insight actually. So there's a real reciprocity there. Actually, it's a relationship, and this goes back to relationships being at the heart of fundraising. And retention can reach 90%. So this does always link back to successful fundraising. But Ken talks about leadership and investment. So there's a few of these themes are going to come up in some of the other talks that we've got this morning. Certainly one around retention and what we can do around welcome journeys, but also about leadership and investment. So both of those are going to come up in some case studies in a moment. This is why measuring supporter experience is so powerful, because if you don't know how good your experience is, how can you possibly aim to improve it and achieve it? So measuring supporter experience is incredibly powerful, and it's the right thing to do. So you might be running supporter surveys at the moment. You might be going out and listening to your supporters. Those surveys, those insights that you're gathering from your supporters need to focus on how they're feeling. Yes, you'll have surveys that will be prospecting for legacies and major gifts and capital campaigns and things like that. But this is different. This is listening to how your supporters are feeling. It shows you exactly where to invest for the biggest return. And that's why it's so important. And I think if we talked about at the beginning what the problem was, which is we're not spending enough time attending to how our supporters feel, attending to their experience. Actually, Ken's messages align really closely with what we see in our data, actually where we can see that real connect between how supporters feel and ultimately what they go on to do and give. So big thank you to Ken, and I hope you've enjoyed that first step in the roadmap. We're now going to move on to Joe White. He is the Fundraising and Supporter Experience Manager at Greenpeace International. So he is, Greenpeace International is like another central hub of all of the different regional offices. And he works across all of those different international regional offices. And he's actually going to share in this piece how Greenpeace tackled a global challenge using this measure. So you can measure experience. How can we use this to tackle this big problem? And it's a brilliant example of how even the biggest organisations really need clarity on what drives the experience. And I talked about commitment, satisfaction, and trust. And Joe will refer to those as well. And the tools that they use can be they're the same tools that can be used by any charity. You don't have to be a big global organisation too. You could be a small community-based organisation. You could be a national organisation in any kind of sector. The same tools work wherever you are. So as you listen to Joe, please do think about this in terms of not just, oh, this is only going to work for a big international NGO. This can work for you as well. So just think about those tools, what you might want to take away from Joe's piece here. So over to Joe.
Now, at the time when we started this project, we were also coming out of COVID and the global lockdowns. And as part of kind of coming out and seeing the challenges that we were facing, Greenpeace International had undertaken an engagement landscape report, which highlighted the acquisition challenges that we were then and still are, if we're honest with ourselves, facing across the network. And as you can see, recruiting new supporters, both in terms of leads and donors, was a huge issue. And that was really impacting our kind of fundraising guiding stars of net donor growth and net income growth right the way across the network. And that meant that retaining each supporter, keeping them active with us, keeping them engaged for as long as possible was more important than ever. So when the Global Fundraising Directors community met for the first time back in person after the pandemic, it was agreed that working to understand what drives supporter loyalty and trying to measure that was a project that was worth investing in. About Loyalty have some core loyalty statements for really understanding commitment, satisfaction, and trust. So we asked those. They also added in some questions linked to those pillars that they've tested with other organisations that they felt could be relevant to us. And then as Greenpeace, we brought in some questions around things that we were speculating could create that connection and loyalty with our supporters, such as the type of campaigns that we work on, the values that our donors share with us, how they feel about Greenpeace, how they feel about our campaigning approach, the way we engage and communicate with them as our supporter. And ultimately, we tested around 100 statements, and that is a lot. And following the pilot, based on the results, we will be looking to streamline this, but we really wanted to go as broad as possible to give us the best understanding for what the key drivers of supporter engagement might be. In testing our assumptions, they were proved right that those core statements around commitment, satisfaction, and trust were those that correlated most strongly with that self-reported intention to continue supporting Greenpeace in whichever way they chose. Now, you may well have heard this before at Loyalty Day, but I like to think of them as levers. The more that we increase someone's positivity regarding these statements, the more likely that they are going to keep giving to Greenpeace. And the further over the statement, the bigger the impact that it has. So the more important it is for us to get those right in the experience that the supporter has with us. So overall, our commitment score was the highest, then satisfaction, with trust still above average, but the lowest of the scores that we have seen. But actually, we found things varied incredibly by the different country offices participating in the pilot. For example, if you look at the country represented by the red bar, they were our highest office for commitment, second for satisfaction, but in the bottom half of our offices for trust, whereas the office in dark green had the lowest score for commitment, in the middle for satisfaction, but was our highest scoring office for trust. And the really great thing about that is that we can start sharing with each other and using those strengths to complement and support each other on our weaknesses. But I thought I'd finish with 5 tips or learnings from my experience with this process. First, it helps you to create that language, to have conversations around what is important. It's been so useful for us to have both the words and the tangible score to help focus our strategic thinking and engage with other departments around the importance of investing in loyalty and development initiatives. Second, I would advise people to go as wide as possible. There are so many insights for us to be gained by comparing against different offices. So whether it's departments, products, audience segments for you, I think there's real value in being as inclusive as possible when you're thinking about what drives loyalty. And that leads on to the third and fourth points, because it lets you understand your challenges and ask yourself, why have you got those scores, so that you can find what is working and look to replicate it in different moments throughout your journey. Each of our offices has had hidden gems and magic moments, and looking at their loyalty scores and thinking about why that was the case has helped us unearth and share some really lovely engagement tactics that we were excited to test in other programs. And finally, there is always so much to do when it comes to creating that experience for our supporters. We are never done and we are never finished. And I'm sure that you, like me, and all of the brilliant people who participated in the pilot are super busy. So whether it's capitalizing on your strengths or looking to improve in those areas that you're weaker, a metric like the loyalty score can really help us to focus and prioritize our time and our budget to create the best experience for our supporters and ultimately create more money to create those changes in the world that Ken said people are looking to do with us. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Joe, too.
Now,
good stuff. Joe talked about commitment, satisfaction, and trust as the loyalty levers, didn't he? And his lessons mirror what we see across the sector. And actually, when Joe's talking about the different offices at Greenpeace kind of communicating and sharing lessons, so the one with the low trust and high commitment and all of those, and then sharing best practice, that's what we do in our community as well. So we've got different organisations, it's like a peer support group, and everybody's sharing lessons and successes and failures, in fact, but particularly around commitment, satisfaction, trust, and those levers. So what did Joe give? Yeah, he told us that commitment, satisfaction, trust predict continued giving. Do you remember that chart with all of those dots on? The ones on the left were those. Those are the most important ones in terms of making that connection between experience and income. Yeah, they vary widely across teams, and that variation is gold. I've kind of already said that, and it's because there's an opportunity to learn there. This is going back to this one here, shared metrics create shared language. This is also coming back to the example I gave at the beginning around the Cancer Research Organisation, where they talked about soft power. And actually, if people are using the same language to describe goals and objectives, that can be incredibly helpful, illuminating. It really does help, like, kind of lift fog from or remove barriers between different teams and departments if we're using that shared language. Really powerful. And Joe at the end there talked about magic moments, and those emerge when you ask the why behind the score. So if you're doing something well, you just have a look underneath, like, actually you have to know that you're doing it well first, then you look back and then you can spot those moments of magic, those kind of points of inspiration, those points when supporters remember you for the right reasons, and they really kind of come to the surface. And those are some of the things that can really drive your loyalty, your experience, and that score up. So actually, if you've ever struggled to get your teams aligned around supporter experience, then this is the missing piece, kind of creating that shared language, those opportunities to celebrate. It can be really, really powerful. So again, thank you to Joe. And this is kind of step 2. So if step 1 on the roadmap is, oh yeah, what's the big thing that we're looking at? And it is experience. We need to measure it. Joe said, actually looking at these three main levers that he talked about, these are the big things that we've got to get right. And it's not difficult. It's just that we've got to go through these steps. We've got to measure it to know what we need to look at.
Richard, I might just jump in with a question from Trisha.
Yeah, sure.
We move on from Greenpeace. So Trisha asks, for much smaller organisations, I think she's put us of around, say, 20 people, how can we compare to organisations like Greenpeace in this work?
It's a brilliant question, and we work with lots of organisations of that size. And so the principles are the same. So the work we've done, that huge amount of data that we have is from large organisations, small organisations. It's from regular givers, cash donors, lottery, legacy, lots of different products, lots of different sectors. And actually what we've done is we've controlled for all those different factors and isolated those levers, as Joe described, the levers that are most important. So they apply as much at a global NGO as it would for a community organisation with just 20 staff. And it's a brilliant question. Thank you. I don't always remember to think of it in that way, but absolutely, it's if you go and look in the reports and the research, all of that detail is there. But yeah, thanks so much for the question. Now I'm going to move on to Katie Mitchell. Katie Mitchell is Head of Supporter Engagement at Mind, which is a UK mental health charity. And Katie explains how Mind used the data to uncover some tough truths at the organisation. Supporters weren't hearing enough about the impact of the work. Many didn't feel thanked, and even passionate supporters really didn't have that real committed connection. And this is incredibly common. And this is why we end up working with organisations who have these challenges, and we can help take them on that stepwise route and fix it. But I'm going to go over to Katie now, who's going to talk through her story, which has a nice ending to it. Thank you, Katie.
We started measuring the loyalty support supporters in 2020, and we had been using the findings to inform team plans and make recommendations to supporter-facing teams about how they could improve the supporter experience. In 2022, Mind scores dropped significantly, which is always fun when you see graphs with your scores going definitely the wrong way. And because using the Chase Index, we could compare our results to other charities, we could see that across the board, actually, scores were going down. We knew there were some external factors happening, but what we also could see is that we were outperforming almost everybody else in our drop in scores. So we knew there was something in particular for us as well that wasn't quite working. So essentially, what this was telling us was that we were failing to effectively communicate with supporters about how they made a difference. We weren't connecting them to the impact of their support. The survey results also told us that the way we were showing gratitude just wasn't working. Supporters didn't feel like they were being thanked appropriately for their donation. And at the same time, while in previous years we'd been sharing recommendations with teams based on the insights the survey gave us, what had become clear was that some of the implementation of those recommendations was beyond the control of individual teams, and we needed a cross-organisation solution. So if we were really going to move our scores significantly, we all needed to be working together. And so this is where I kind of set out on my mission to get supporter experience on the agenda, with the aim that we could influence decisions that would help us move towards a better supporter experience. The great but scary thing about having a graph that shows you second from bottom in a big list of charities is it gives you kind of gives you the problem you're trying to solve in very clear terms. And the way we talked about this to the leadership team at Mind was we talked about supporters giving Mind a low score for trust. So what we talked about was that supporters weren't hearing enough about the impact of their support. We talked about supporters not always being satisfied with their experience, particularly how they were thanked. And we also talked about people who cared about mental health but don't necessarily feel committed to their future relationship with Mind. And we can talk about what happens if we do nothing in terms that we know our leadership teams care about, right? So that means outlining the financial and reputational risk. So for Mind, and again, we've heard this all afternoon, right? If giving is a good experience, people will keep doing it. And that incremental growth delivered through improved supporter experience was already built into our 3-year income plans. So there is a financial risk there if you don't improve supporter experience. We're already saying we're going to achieve it in our forecast. Again, the Chase Index is so useful here. There's something very motivating about seeing a big list of charities doing better than you to kind of kick you into action. And the last bullet is doing a lot of heavy lifting here, because that concise, targeted recommendations was the thinking, and that was the hard bit, if I'm honest. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the aim here was to distill all our possible actions into some achievable tasks, to set ourselves a clear, measurable goal and build our strategy into what other teams needed to achieve. We were looking for the sweet spot between actions that we knew would move the needle on our loyalty score, and also knowing the problems that our teams were facing and that they cared about, but needed cross-organisation solutions. So here is where we ended up. Okay, so in the middle, what you can see is Mind's strategy wheel. And the win here was that supporter experience is there, named as a strategic enabler in our organisation strategy. Sitting under that supporter experience strategy then are 4 work streams, and sitting underneath that was our KPI to increase our trust and satisfaction scores as measured by the supporter survey by 3% by April 2026. And this next slide makes me feel a bit happier about sharing that first one where we were like bottom of the list, because ta-da! We achieved that target early. There's still loads to do, but it was quite scary, I think, to set out this KPI around a score that is about sentiment, and you can't do one action that moves the dial. It's about a whole series of actions and working together and kind of the totality of the supporter experience. So I think tricky to set a KPI, but definitely helped us to focus our attention and align, or there's a nice strategy word, align the organisation behind what we were trying to achieve.
Thank you, Katie. So one of the things that Katie talks about is she talks about KPIs actually a lot, and I love that because I'm a bit of a data geek, I like measuring stuff, and actually measuring the experience is really important. And I think Mind took that bold step of putting quantified KPIs on their experience. They said, right, and actually I'll go back to right at the beginning, only if you measure something can you change it, and actually by measuring it, it changes you as well. And this is it. This is the change from insight, measuring stuff, knowing how we're doing, to organisational alignment, getting experience in strategy, getting people behind it, and seeing the KPIs shift. So this is like, it works. Katie's story shows what happens when you kind of get everybody behind you, and how you can get it working. So data revealed the real issues. So measure what matters. Experience. Make sure you introduce something like that. Get your teams aligned around those shared goals. Again, going back to the soft power. set a KPI. Set a KPI. That really does create that kind of real focus on what you're trying to achieve. And this is the kind of transformation that we help organisations make, and it is entirely achievable. So that's why I love what Katie talks about, because it really brings to life the fact that you measure something, diagnose where it's perhaps a bit shaky, you take action, and bang, go straight through to income. Right then, so next case study is with from Sydney Children's Hospitals Foundation.
Richard,
Richard,
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Anna has just asked for a bit more. Can you just provide a bit more info about how you actually do, how an organisation would actually do the measuring? What is involved in the measuring?
Yeah, so the measuring is listening to supporters, which is perhaps a roundabout way of saying you do a survey, and that survey can be through the post, it can be online, it can be qualitative, quantitative, but you go out and you ask your supporters. And we have a framework of questions and statements which we have developed through that those 10 years, those millions of data points. We know the right statements. And I think Joe expressed it really, really well. He said it's like levers. So if you've got these, there are 12 statements, and the more your supporters strongly agree with those 12 statements, that's where you're looking to. That's kind of the gold standard, if that makes sense. So there are 12 statements. You ask them of your supporters, and you come up with a measure. So and you'll have and you can sample that across different product groups, different audiences, so that you're then able to diagnose where you're doing well and where you're doing less well. But if you want more detail on that, probably best to drop me a line separately, and we could talk through all of that.
Lovely, thanks, Richard. Because I was going to ask about how you measure feeling, and it sounds like you are putting statements to the survey respondents, kind of to gauge their response against those 12 statements, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So this is where all of our work is about asking supporters how they feel. So Joe talked about more than 100 statements. It's really hard to pin down and ask somebody so if I could have read the minds of everybody when you all had your eyes closed, you would have all been thinking different things, because strong feeling, good experience, strength of relationship will mean different things to different people, and you'll articulate it. You might say, I feel valued and seen. It might be, I'm making a difference to the world. I'm fighting the bastards who are making our world shit, or whatever. Who will all express it in different ways. And what we've done is we've tested those different expressions of relationship, of love for your charity, and isolated those that are most important. So yes, it is about feelings, but feelings is a hard thing to kind of disentangle. It's complicated. And so what we've done is we've broken it down to lots of different statements about specific areas, and then tested them to see which ones are most important. But so I could talk for several more hours today about that, because it is genuinely interesting stuff. And there's just so much to learn. And our final case study is from some of good friends of ours in Australia. So here we've got Tanya Serena, who's Director of Donor Experience, Tess O'Sullivan, Head of Individual Giving, and Timothy Talty, Head of Donor and Patient Engagement at Sydney Children's Hospitals Foundation. And they faced a familiar problem. In fact, Ken mentioned it. Donors gave once, received a receipt, then heard nothing. So the journey was transactional, and they were looking to how to improve retention, second gift rate, all of those things. And so they've got a great story about how they did that. So over to the crew at Sydney Children's Hospital Foundation.
Like many of you, I'm sure we found ourselves asking, what's the point of pouring funding, resources and energy into acquisition if we can't keep those donors around long enough to cover the cost of acquiring them? They believed in our mission enough to give once, but something was missing that kept them from staying. And when we looked closer, the reason was pretty clear. Our supporter experience was transactional. It lacked warmth, personalisation and meaningful engagement. For many donors, their journey with us was a one and done experience. They gave, they received a receipt, and then silence. If we wanted to turn donors into lifelong supporters, we needed to rethink everything. We needed to move from transactions to relationships, from thank you to we see you, from passive communication to genuine engagement.
So to do that, we designed an automated welcome journey that introduced donors to our mission, showed them their impact, and kept them engaged. And at the heart of this journey is one key goal: encouraging that all-important second gift from new cash donors. And to do that, we introduced a quiz placed right at the start of the journey. So the quiz was designed to help us understand what kind of supporter we were speaking to. Were they driven by self-identity, the kind of person who gives because it aligns on who they are or who they feel that they are? Or were they motivated by the identity of the beneficiary, so wanting to help sick kids or fund pioneering research, or perhaps a bit of both? Based on their responses, donors were segmented into 3 groups: self-biased, other biased, or a mixture of both. And from there, they were sent personalized impact communications crafted to align with their underlying motivations. These ranged from emotive storytelling to data-driven infographics, catering to different content preferences and reading styles. If a donor made a second gift during that welcome period, we fast-tracked them. So what that meant was that 2 things happened. So number 1, they were excluded from the trust nudge because they'd already shown us trust by giving us a second gift, and they were flagged for a personal call or email just to say thank you, no ask. And because we didn't want to rely solely on automation, we were still maturing in our tech setup, we brought in extra hands to help. A temporary resource was engaged to make thank you calls and outbound engagement calls. And those calls revealed something quite important, which was donors were giving because they had a personal connection to the hospital or they were supporting a friend's fundraiser. This helped identify another pain point for us. If a donor thinks that they gave to their friend rather than to us, they're far less likely to stay engaged. And that's why these early touch points were so critical. We really needed to reframe their giving experience to remind them that their generosity wasn't just about supporting their friend or their fundraiser, but about changing lives. So we shared this with our community giving team who run the peer-to-peer fundraising events, and now those donors receive a tailored welcome journey to engage them with SCHF. And then we turned our attention to a make or break moment in a donor journey, their third gift. And we did that really because research shows that a third donation is the single most important gift a donor will ever make. It's the moment they either commit for the long haul or disappear forever. So we made that moment special. We introduced an opt-in thank you gift, which was a really small but also thoughtful gesture that allowed donors to choose between a magnet, a notepad, or a pen, all branded with a message of gratitude. It's simple, but it worked because when donors feel valued, they do stay on.
So, after kicking this project off in response to what we saw in our FY21 data, navigating the hurdles, ironing out the kinks, and slowly building something we could be proud of, by FY24, we started to see the results. Some of which are highlighted on the screen, and all of which are indicating a greater commitment of our donors to SCHF with increasing donor sizes. The median gift grew up by $17.80, and our average gift size increased by nearly $20. Our personalized donor-centric approach resulted in stronger engagement. Our open rates jumped from 21.2% up to 31.4%. And in the first phase of our thank you call pilot also had a huge impact on this single initiative, bringing in 185 donations worth $115,000 or £56,000. And it also reactivated 37 regular givers. In our individual giving segment, retention climbed from 39.7% in FY21 to 49% in FY24, and it kept growing. After assessing the data from FY25, we had seen that it had increased to 54%. We felt this was a promising indicator that our hard work investment is delivering the results we wanted to see across our organisation.
Thank you, Tanya, Tess, and Tim. Brilliant stuff. And it all knits together so neatly. It's, got to measure the right stuff. So as Tim was saying, that the data they found in 2021 told them where they needed to look they took action, and they designed those early experiences to build loyalty, to improve the experience that leads through to their income. So fix the early journey. It sets the tone. I love how Tanya described it as well. It's about moving from transactions to relationships, and that before they'd have no warmth. And going right back to what Ken was saying, it's there all the time, isn't it? And how many times when we're writing an appeal brief or we're thinking about the next regular gift campaign, whatever that is, do we really think about how it's making our supporters feel? Are we really putting ourselves in their shoes and getting that right? Use a simple quiz to understand motivations. This is what Tess was talking about. I mean, it's simple and it's a really kind of quick skim over all of the work they did, but anybody can do that. Human thank you calls, not always possible, but they reveal insights that you can't get any other way. And actually that really helps to build that connection. And yeah, one of their kind of key takeouts was to make that third gift a milestone moment. And we've seen the impacts that that's had on their retentions, on their retention rates. So if you're thinking, yeah, we could do this, but we don't know where to start. Again, this is exactly the kind of stuff that we've been doing for years and years and years. And actually the lessons that Tanya, Tess, and Tim talked about, they're simple and they're replicable. You can do these again and again. So that it's not just it's something that anybody could do. So I'm just going to wrap up because I'm conscious of time now. But bringing it all together, start with donors want. Start with what donors want. Start with what your supporters. Remember that if you close your eyes, remember those feelings. We need to be bringing that to the centre of our work. Think about how Tanya described it. It's about moving to that warmth, that relationship, remembering what brings the donors here to the first place. Measure what matters. So if you've identified that experience and that feeling, work out whether or not you're making it happen. And you can only do that by asking your supporters, not will you leave a legacy, will you leave a gift in your will, but actually, how passionate are you about our work? Do you really feel the impact that we're making together? How grateful do you, how much gratitude do you feel from us? The right things. Create that shared language. So this is now looking a bit more internally, because actually that can really help unlock so much more power internally to like having those impacts with your supporters, and embed it where you can. And this is going to be small steps as well. So this isn't like a starting point, but think about how you can get this adopted more widely across the organisation. And again, from Sydney Children's Hospital Foundation, they've designed intentional journeys. They don't need to be complicated. It is about maybe put in a simple quiz early on, and maybe that's enough, but be intentional about how you're doing it. And go right back to the start. And this isn't something that will be in everybody's gift, but have it as a kind of a North Star, if you like, that actually you will need to have some impact and influence on leadership systems, not tech systems, but how you do stuff, and culture, the language that you use together, all really important stuff. So if you'd like help applying it, this is what we do every day, and would love to would love to hear from you. If you've got any more questions, please do ask now. I'm conscious that we're already at past. But if you've got any questions now and you're able to stay on and I can answer them, I'll do my best. But if not, you know where to find me. Please do send them by email, and I'll answer them. I'll get some of our speakers to respond, and maybe even Fiona will give a reply.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks so much. And as Richard said, I can see that there's some questions there that are kind of direct to the case study. So, Richard, it might be that you can answer. It might be that you might have to kind of ask the case studies for some answers. So, just jumping into there, Sue asks about the 12 statements. So she wants to know who makes up the statements. Is it you or the client or both? And why is there 12 statements?
So there doesn't have to, well, there were not 12 at the beginning. At the beginning, there were hundreds of statements. And when we've rerun, we did the original piece of work we did was a 3-year longitudinal study across 60,000 individual charity, non-profit donors and supporters. And we tracked over 3 years both how they described their relationship with the organisations they supported, and we tracked their actual giving as well. So we were able to have the two sets. We included hundreds of statements. And what we did is we analysed all of that data to identify which statements were most significant in influencing and predicting somebody's future behaviour. So it was really looking at cause and effect. I have this feeling if I have this feeling, I'm going to be more likely to give in the future. So it's not about correlation. It's looking at which feelings actually drive somebody's future behavior. And we sliced it and diced it by sector, country, product, age, gender, region, all sorts of things, tenure. And we isolated, we didn't know how many there were going to be, but we isolated the 12 statements that were most predictive and most the biggest in terms of driving future financial support. And it turns out there were 12 of them. And so those 12, and we've tested it twice since, tested it with Greenpeace International and another organisation, and had the same answer again. So we've kind of gone, actually, these 12 statements are the most important. So it's not like we wanted 12, or it's not like anybody made them up, if that makes sense. They kind of emerged out of the research. So there were hundreds in there. These are the ones that came to the surface as being the ones that were consistently driving future behaviour. But great question.
Thanks, Richard. Candy is just asking about, do you have any thoughts or ideas about how this kind of work can be executed for organisations with very small budgets?
So in exactly the same way. So I would hope that that somewhere in your plan, in your organisation, you will be doing some talking to supporters. There'll be opportunities to have some kind of two-way conversation. If you're an organisation with only tens of donors, then it will be about having conversations with them personally and picking out what's working and what isn't. And actually, that's, in a lot of ways, that's what we want to try and emulate, is that kind of one-to-one relationship where you really are creating those relationships. I think if you have hundreds or some thousands or low thousands of donors and supporters, you could do some insight work, some research. But we work with organisations who, and actually Sydney Children's Hospital did this. It's you pop quizzes in at appropriate times. So you could have, if you have an online donation form, you could have a simple box in there saying, asking about either prompting some of the 12 statements, or just inquiring as to how the experience is for them, finding out about that. So it doesn't need to be fully hugely data-driven exercise. It is about understanding how you define your experience, measure how well you're doing against that, and then take some action. So it can be scaled. It really can be scaled. And actually, it's sometimes quicker and easier working with smaller organisations who are able to say, right, okay, we're going to stick a form upon that, a box up on that donation form, and we'll see what people say. It can just be a free text box capturing supporters' verbatim feedback, because that's also a great source of what's going well and what isn't going well.
Thanks, Richard. Sophie, I don't entirely understand your question, but I'm hoping that Richard will. Sophie says, please clarify open rates meaning.
Right, that's email open rates. So okay. That's the Sydney Children's Hospital Foundation. They increased the warmth of the relationship with their audiences, such that when emails landed in their inboxes, 50%, I think it went from 20% to 21% to 31%. So there was a massive jump in terms of the number of people who were warm to seeing the emails in their inboxes and opening them.
Okay. A question here from Michelle about the Sydney Children's case study. In giving gifts to supporters, did they get much negative feedback about using money for better purposes than providing a gift, I guess?
I don't know. I'll ask.
Okay.
I'll ask. Yeah, I've got a call with Tanya this week or next week. I'll find out. Yeah, that's a good question. And will I get a copy of these so I don't forget?
Yes, I think so. I think we can
provide you
with a copy, and we will track down Michelle's email address and we can send her that. Lanice asks, is the importance around the third gift in relation to regular giving or single giving?
Single giving.
Single giving. It's the third. Yes, the third single gift.
Yes. So it's not looking at those people on a committed gifts schedule, direct debit, that kind of program. It's It's actually looking for those people who are taking those steps to make that additional gift.
Okay, lovely.
Not automated.
We've had another question from Polly asking about, was there any negative feedback about spending money on a gift? Polly, will come back to you on that. So with Sydney Children's, Roz asks, were all donors called, or were all donors called, or just donors who gave over a certain gift amount?
I didn't know the answer. It wasn't all, and I don't know if it was over a certain gift amount, but it wasn't all because they didn't have the capacity. But I'll go back and get those details from, that would be Tess, those details.
Lovely. I've just seen in the comments section that Emma's asked if everyone can be provided with a copy of the answers that you're going to chase up with this. That's fine, everyone. It just means it's going to take us a few more days to obviously send out the post-webinar email, because Richard's got to go off and have that conversation with Sydney Children. Usually we try and get that email out in a couple of days, but it might be, say, a week. So just bear with us. And Rashini asks, Rashani, sorry. Most of our donations come through our website and many don't provide a phone number. So we mainly have email addresses, limited opportunity for personal conversations. Should we rely on bulk emails, or is it more important to send personalized emails? I think that's a good one. I think that's the case for quite a lot of charities.
There's no one size fits all answer. I'm sorry. It's like, sounds like a bit of a cop out, but you're going to need a mix, aren't you? And it'll depend on so many factors. But I think the more personalized, the more, in theory, the more personalized you can be, the better. But obviously that comes at a cost. So there's always going to be a trade-off. There is, and it's probably what you're asking. But yeah, there's so many factors that could go into there. I think if you wanted to talk about the specific, I'd be happy to do that. But it is a good question.
Lovely. There's a couple more questions relating to Sydney Children's, which I think
right, okay,
to answer those offline, and we'll drop them in the post.
Yeah.
I'll just finish with a question from Richard, because then we'll just need to wrap things up. But Richard asks, we have a lot of donors who are almost allergic to being thanked. They don't want to be called, emailed, or invited to events, but they give regularly. What is the best way to treat them, or is it okay just to leave them alone?
So I wonder what the allergy is. So there are some great examples of people who say, I don't want to be thanked, but what they mean is, I want to be thanked. So is it what they're saying, or is it what? So have you measured the allergy by thanking people and they're left in their droves, or is it, you said, would you like to be thanked? People always say, no, I don't want to be thanked. And I think the best thing is to find a way of showing gratitude that doesn't look like you're spending money on the thank you. So it might be incorporated into an impact communication. It might be incorporated into a regular letter, and phrased in a way that isn't that's authentic with you as an organisation, but that actually works for who your supporters are. And again, this is going to vary by. So thanking is important, and that is consistent, and that is part of the 12 statements. But it is how you do that and who you do that with will vary. But I would be happy to have a debate about whether or not supporters like to feel valued, and that what they do is appreciated and important. I think, yeah, I'm happy to have that debate, but probably not now. We're already 11 minutes over, whatever. I don't want to be stealing your time for the rest of the morning.
Well, thank you, Richard. Really appreciate that. I just took a quick screenshot of all the questions. I'm sure they'll come through with the chat, but we'll go away and try and get answers to the ones that we couldn't answer live. Thank you, everyone, for being so forthcoming.
Yeah, definitely will.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Richard. I'm sure you want to go to bed. Thank you so much for dialing in from the UK in the evening. Lots of thank yous coming in on the chat, Richard. So everyone seemed to appreciate the knowledge that you shared with us this morning. Thanks, everyone. We will get in touch with you soon with the webinar recording, the slides, and the answers to the questions that are still outstanding. I hope you all have a good afternoon, and Richard, have a good evening, and hope to see you all soon. Thank you again, and take care.